own timing. He's not restricted to man's calendar, to man's timetable. And that's true whether it comes to judgment or blessing. I mean, you know, God moves when he's ready. When he says, okay, enough is enough. You know, that time. Okay. Now, there's an interesting passage in Genesis 15. I'm going to turn there. I told you we'll be going all over the place. For those of you that have the Bibles with you, I'm going to go to Genesis 15. And I'm going to start verse 12. Now, this is before Abram is Abraham, you know. And in verse 12, you know, Abram has fell into like a deep sleep before the Lord. Of course, Abram is already in Canaan land. And we see in verse 12, it says, now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. And behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. Then he, God, capital H, said to Abram, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And of course we can tell this is talking about the time that they were in bondage in Egypt, right? I mean, God is already talking about that to Abram. Isn't that, it's interesting, huh? And then verse 14 says, and also the nation whom they serve, I will judge. And we know that certainly happened. Afterward, you know, with the 10 plagues and all that, and the Egyptian army being slain in the Red Sea. And then afterward, they shall come out with great possessions. Now, as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. And then I want you to really emphasize, read verse 16. This is the verse I wanted to focus in on. It says, but in the fourth generation, they shall return here for, and then he gives a reason why it's the fourth generation. For the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. Now, fourth generation from Abram, if you count after Abram, you can count Levi, 1, Kohath, Amram. You know who the fourth person is? Moses. Okay? In the fourth generation, God's already talking about that. Okay? It says, but in the fourth generation, in the time of Moses, they shall return here. And we know under the leadership of Joshua, they returned to the land of Canaan, right? They shall return here. This is the land of Canaan. So why is it after the fourth generation? For the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. It's almost like the cup of their iniquity has not been filled yet. You know, it seems like even with judgment, there's timing. You know, with God, He doesn't just see something wrong and go boom. I mean, just deal with it right away. I mean, He waits. This is the way God does, till that right moment when that iniquity is complete, boom, God deals with it, right? And the reason why it mentions the Amorites, because they were the strongest group at that time, you know, in Canaan. There were other ites, of course, that God dealt with, but they were the strongest group, and so God mentions Amorites here. But it's an interesting passage, isn't it? So even in judgment, it seems like God awaits its perfect timing. But then with blessings, that's true too. right? You know, Galatians 4. Galatians 4. And I'm sure we've all experienced this and know this passage, but it says, but when the fullness of the time had come. We see this, right? When the fullness of the time has come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, that we might receive the adoption as sons. And so it was in the fullness of the time that Jesus was sent to this earth to die on the cross for us. And then that phrase is really used again in Ephesians chapter 1, verses 7 through 10. I'll just start reading. It says, in him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins, according to the riches of his grace, which he made to abound toward us in all wisdom and prudence, having made known to us the mystery. When he said mystery, it's something that was hidden for a while, but has now been revealed. That's the kind of mystery it's talking about. Have made known to us the mystery of his will, according to his good pleasure, which he purposed in himself, that in the dispensation of the fullness of the times, he might gather together in one all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and which are on earth in him. Now I believe God's working on that, but there's going to come a time in the fullness of the times where this will all just culminate, as God is speaking, where all things, in both which are in heaven and which are on earth will be gathered together. So God always works in fullness of time, it seems like. We want God to move right away a lot of times, right? Our timing is not God's timing.
Yeah.
Usually we want him to move earlier, please. Like, Lord, like we've been believing you for 10 years. And, God showed me things decades ago, literally decades, that I'm still holding on to.
Amen.
Yeah, right? And so sometimes, his time is a little different from ours. And I was mentioning, the raising of Lazarus from the dead. We know when Jesus got the message that Lazarus was deathly sick. I mean, that was the message, right? Lazarus, the person you love, is sick. Did Jesus run to Lazarus? No. The Bible just says very coolly, he stayed there 2 more days. And then, of course, when Lazarus was good and dead, Jesus said, let's go to Judea now. But of course, God had a higher purpose, huh?
Yes.
Higher purpose. Now, if Jesus had gone there right away, of course he could have healed Lazarus. Not a problem. Right? That's another thing that as I've been preparing this message, doing miracle is nothing to God.
Oh, yeah.
You know what's difficult for him is dealing with the hearts of the people.
Yes.
Because he will not violate with the free will.
Yes.
But miracles, opening the Red Sea, healing, child stuff, baby stuff to him.
Yeah.
So Jesus waited 2 days, right? And so both sisters, when they saw Jesus, their first reaction was, if you had been here, if you had come earlier, Lazarus would have been okay. And it's true, right? But God had a higher purpose, right? He wanted to show he is the source of life itself. Jesus said, I am, and not I will be even, but I am right now the resurrection and the life. Right? Another passage that was kind of interesting, and I didn't even realize it until I guess I heard a message where the minister kind of mentioned it. It's in Acts 3. Just to show you, I think that God has timing for everything. Acts 3, verses 1 through 3, it says, "Now Peter and John went up together to the temple at the hour of prayer, the 9th hour." That'll be like 3 p.m. You know, the Jews in those days, they had three prayer times, like 9 a.m., at noon, and at 3 p.m. And the 3 p.m. was called the hour of evening prayer. Okay? And so this is at 3 p.m. And it says, "And a certain man, lame from his mother's womb, was carried, whom they had daily at the gate of the temple, which is called Beautiful, to ask alms from those who entered the temple, who seeing Peter and John about to go into the temple, asked for alms." And of course, we know what happened. We know that Peter and John prayed for this man, and he was healed. But I wanted to just draw your attention, right? This lame man was laid at the gate Beautiful daily, and he probably had a special spot that he always was laid upon. And you could kind of get that feeling, And so he was laid there daily, right? And it was a path where everybody took, I believe, to enter into the temple. I'm sure Jesus passed by this lame man often. And yet, this lame man, I guess he must have not cried out to Jesus, nor Jesus, reach out to this man to heal him at that time. Kind of interesting, right? Because really, literally, here, and Jesus is going by every day. And this man, he was 40 years old, I think it says in the Bible. So it's not like he just got sick and got laid there, after Jesus died on the cross. He was laid there daily, every day in, day out, to beg. Jesus must pass there, but nothing happened. And yet, when Peter and John were passing by, this miracle happened. Right? And one of the commentary said, well, it must be that God knew that this man, that he would be a greater witness for the Lord if he was healed later. Amen. Right? Because he could have been healed earlier through Jesus. He passed by there all the time. Every time people went to pray in the temple, that was probably the road that they took. But somehow, the fullness of time for this lame man was when Peter and John came by, right? Now, I know I'm talking about God's timing. I'm not implying that you have to wait forever for God to move. I'm not implying that, because sometimes God will move faster or earlier than you think. I remember when I moved, that I moved recently out of Yorba Linda, and I think I moved out of the Yorba Linda house on October 2nd, and I was, going to stay in my brother's house temporarily until I could find my new place. And, I didn't know how long it will take. Usually it may take 2 or 3 months. While you look for something. I wasn't sure if I wanted to buy a little condo, a tiny condo, or rent when I moved out of the house. And so, I took a little bit of all types of clothing. It was still warm, so I took some summer clothes, autumn clothes, winter clothes, I couldn't take much because their house has been kind of stuffed with David and Amber's stuff, because they have a little apartment, and so I knew I couldn't bring over too many things, because my brother, refers to his own house as the Breyer storage, and yeah. So I didn't know how long I would be, but on October 31st, I had moved into the new apartment. And now, God moved faster than I was expecting. Now I was happy because every time you have to wait. I had things in storage that would cost me money every month, but it was like, wow. I was happy at the same time. It's like, I have to move again. you know. I've been overdosed on moving. I mean, you know, it was a big job to move out of the house, you know. But God can move swiftly. All right, so I'm not saying that you have to wait a long time. Okay, just be expectant every moment of the day. Right? When you believe in God for something, expect Him to move. And be in expectation all the time. All right? But I'm just saying, you know, just know that God is His timing. A lot of times He has somehow a higher purpose for things than what we think. So we just have to trust God and believe God. Right? And so what do we do? You know, in the meantime? Well, I believe Daniel gave us, you know, in the Old Testament, part of that answer. We were talking about that. It's like, you know, he was in a tight spot there, but what did he do? Because all these leaders, the satraps, the governors came against him. The Bible tells us, right, he continued to do as was his custom. He just continued to do